Listeners everywhere, welcome to the Movie Show with Joel and Ryan, the weekly fix for your screen addiction and a trusted source for discussion of all things film and television. Please keep in mind that for the purposes of this podcast, Joel and Ryan are not acting as journalists, but rather fellow moving picture enthusiasts. All of their opinions should be taken as such. Also, please be warned that while Joel and Ryan may seem like petulant children, they are, in fact, adults who may occasionally use adult language. While they promise to bleep out all the worst words, it's a good bet you will still understand what they were saying. And now, with no further ado, here's Joel and Ryan.
Get yourself some wide lapel collars and some artificial material and make it into a leisure suit. It's the Movie Show with Joel and Ryan. We are happy to have you here for another week. I am Joel.
And I'm Ryan.
And we are going to have a fun show. Today, it is old. We had 4 people on screen and in your ears last week. So today, we're cutting that in half. And we're just going to do OG Movie Show with Joel and Ryan, with Joel and Ryan. And
standardized version.
And you, the listener. And we
thin crust variety.
Yep. And gluten-free. We're super thrilled to have you joining us for another week. And I hope you had a chance to listen to last week's show.
It's a favorite of ours for sure.
Yeah, I was kind of buzzing on that show for a good day or two after I had so much fun. Chris Fitchett was such a super guest, and it was so awesome having someone who actually participated in that whole era and was part of that whole scene.
Yeah.
God,
and as knowledgeable as insightful as he was, he did us a real favor too, which is he let you and me and Michael be ourselves. And so I think that all that magic happened in that episode. It was really, really fantastic.
Yeah.
There was one little bit that I think Chris kind of wanted to get out, and we were. If you guys have watched last week's episode, the Ozploitation episode, we got, by the end of it, we were in full on, it was like drunken argument mode. Nobody was drinking that I'm aware of, but it turned into that sort of crazy free for all that happens when you're talking about these things with friends, and you have minor disagreements, and you like to get a little worked up about them. Just because it's fun to get riled up about stuff.
Well, and as I shared, as I shared to Chris, I'm like, Chris didn't know that he was essentially going to take a trip back to the dorm rooms back in 1995.
Right. Well, he didn't even know that he was joining on for a radio show. He thought we were just going to ask him questions and then edit him into some sort of thing. So I was telling him when you guys were off getting ready or doing your pre-production work, he's like, so you're not doing any editing? And I told him, I said, like, hey, well, we reserve the right to do editing, but no, if it all goes according to plan, you're on the radio. It's just, we're just all talking, and that's what podcast listeners, in my experience, greatly prefer. I think you lose something when you sort of chop things up into pieces and stuff, unless you're really, really good at that sort of thing. So he rolled with that really great too, but he didn't get to, and I'll let him use his words here. Joel's going to roll the tape here, but we just wanted to revisit that episode real quick, thank him again, and thank Michael again for coming on. And it was so much fun. And this was we don't have the video of it, but my tape kept rolling at home, and I captured this little extra part of the conversation with Chris and with Michael and me talking about the films that Michael hadn't seen. I think it's worth playing. So
yeah, because we had talked so glowingly, and it was such a small community of people that were involved in this. And then, you know, it was goofy. And as Chris, I'll let Chris right at the top of the sounder here, Chris explains why he sort of waited until until after we stopped. So all right, so this is just a little revisit post show of last week's Ozploitation episode. So here we go.
The only thing I didn't mention, and I wasn't sure about the tone because we're having so much fun, is when I talked about those filmmakers being a previous generation, Richard Franklin died at the age of 59, Everett de Roche died at the age of 68, and Colin Eggleston died at the age of 60.
Wow.
Yeah.
Too fast.
We're mainly talking about. They're all born 941, 46, 48. But they died
so young.
For example, Everett de Roche would have, he died 6 years ago, or 7 years ago. He would have written 70 screenplays.
Oh yeah, I mean, I thought about that a little bit too especially when I saw that that Everett de Roche has passed away, you know, in 2014 or whatever. You know, and it's like that he's got 6 grandchildren or something like that he leaves.
No, 6 children.
Oh, 6 children,
and countless grandchildren.
Probably,
I would guess
several grandchildren then.
And grandchildren.
Yeah. So, I hope that this kind of ended up being a deep dive into Everett de Roche.
Basically, I guess, yeah.
Well, we didn't, and it's funny because we didn't. Obviously, we pay attention to the names behind the films on the show, but we didn't until we put the list together. I didn't see that they were all the same guy. We really did it based on the films. You know, it wasn't.
Yeah, we were trying to get a sampling of the whole genre as well as
and keep it era specific. Like I said, golden age of Ozploitation, because it certainly is it's a thing that lives on to this day. No question. Michael mentioned a couple of them,
but he never got the recognition in Australia that
really
deserved. For example, I think he was nominated for awards, but he never won an award for best screenplay or etc. So, and that's one of the reasons Richard Franklin left Australia obviously for his career. But then he came back later. He came back and did adaptations of 2 plays, which his theory was you could do for low budget because it was basically people talking. But so for someone who went from Road Games to, it was called Hotel Sorrento, and Brilliant Lies, they were adaptations of plays. They were like film plays.
Well, and just or I guess it's more like 3 years ago now, but Russell Mulcahy made the In Like Flynn film, the Errol Flynn biopic, which I don't know how great a movie that was, but it was inspired. The story was interesting.
Yeah, it was young Errol Flynn.
Young Errol Flynn before he was a star, when he was an adventurer.
In Tasmania, going to New Guinea, etc.
Yeah, I thought that was really cool. I had no idea. As a bit of biography, I think it's a bit of a bait and switch. They sell it as a fun adventure movie, and it really is sort of a dark, believable adventure story in a way that's not always fun like the movies are fun, which is the point of the thing, I think. But I thought it was a cool film.
So before we break, give me, so Harlequin, Treasure / Race, Turkey Shoot, and Sky Pirates, which I tried to find.
Sky Pirates is going to be tough.
It's
for you
not
to
there.
find.
It's not even fine. So out of those other 3, what's the order? What's priority?
Harlequin, I think, has got to be.
Yeah, Yankee Zephyr, and then
Turkey Shoot. So basically, as we talked about them.
Or if you really want to be smart about it, I would watch it like this, because I don't always put together double features, and I think I'm pretty good at it. In terms of what is best, I would watch Turkey Shoot first. I would follow it up with Harlequin, and then I would use Yankee Zephyr as a palate cleanser, because that's a conventional, fun, easy to watch movie.
Okay.
Yeah.
That would be my order if you're going to watch them all. That's not the order of quality necessarily.
Because I just watched them. Turkey Shoot and Harlequin are available on Amazon Prime. And there we go. Yeah, so we want
little extra conversation.
Yeah, we'll find out what Michael thinks of those.
We'll do some follow up with Michael. We got tentatively him coming up for a couple episodes in May.
Yeah,
that we're excited about. So
those are going to be
we'll see.
Just to tease that we're going to have a couple episodes dealing with a spectacular
a topic that we're all inordinately passionate about. So it should be fun.
All right. So again, thank you so much to Chris Fitchett for coming on, and for Michael for putting us in touch with him and being also part of the show. So go ahead, if you haven't listened to last week's show, I'm gonna keep telling you to listen to it, because I think it was a really super fun couple hours. Okay, so today we are going to take a trip back to at the very beginning of one of the golden ages of cinema. Now, we on the Movie Show with Joel and Ryan, we always say we try to talk about films that sort of have happened in our lifetime. We try to, we try to cap things, and I
think it happens naturally, actually. I mean, we don't have any hard and fast rule that we can't talk about anything we want, but we tend to evaluate. There really was a paradigm shift in cinema in the late 60s, going into the 70s for about 10 years, a full decade. It's not quite just the 70s, but that 67 to 77, from The Graduate to Star Wars. Star Wars, obviously, Jaws, but Star Wars really was this paradigm shift into, to some degree, what we're still living in, that same era of cinema. Not completely, but to some degree. But this is an era, it's era specific, and it's a few things that drop by the wayside. We're not going to talk about Godfather or any of that. None of the big seminal films, although there's a couple here that are quite iconic, to be fair. I've stumbled across these because these movies have been the slowest to get taken care of, to get put out, to get restored so that you can watch them properly. And I have waited on most of them for that reason. And now they're here, and they've been remastered for streaming and for broadcast, and they've got discs out that you can buy or hunt down. And so they're back in a cool way, in a way where, it's throughout the 80s and 90s, these films weren't easy to watch in a nice way.
So today we are going to take a trip. This is the Movie Show with Joel and Ryan's way back celebration of the 70s.
We're gonna have a party. A 70s party. Inviting all our friends.
That's you, listeners.
You're the friends.
Yep. All right. So as Ryan said, we're gonna kind of, it's 68-ish. There's a couple here that there's
the oldest one is 69, and I think there might be one from 78 that's snuck on here too.
But this is all like early mid 70s here, and frankly, just like all great 70s films, the 70s actually loves the 1600s, baby.
That's a weird couple of movies to start out with, but these were the two that I started out with, so you can tell kind of where my head's at. I wanted to experience, this old school epic storytelling, right? So I'll let you start out with the first one. I can't remember which one we picked, but
the first one is, both of these are from 1970, and the first one is the historical drama Cromwell.
Yeah, these are both like 50s, like this is the studios hanging on to the old 50s storytelling style, the big cinerama, historical adventures and dramas. Cromwell, Richard Harris plays Oliver Cromwell, and it's about obviously the overthrow of can't remember the name of the king. Charles? Was it one of the Charleses?
Played by yes, it is the first.
Charles the First, played brilliantly by Alec Guinness. It's not super historically accurate. It sort of, it really funnels some really complicated politics and stuff into sort of a very simplified grievances between, in this case, the rich guys who were in Parliament and the royal family, because it's often viewed, at least they get this part right, that time in history is often viewed of some uprising of the people, but it just Duke of this, Sir that, deciding that they wanted to be a republic, and over one specific sort of incident, they broke with the King of England. And very famously, as soon as they won that battle, spoiler alert for, the uprising, but they wanted to institute another head of state immediately. America did the same thing. I don't know if you guys know this. In the American Revolution, the first suggestion was to make George Washington king. The people of even that era they had a hard time imagining some other kind of thing. You know what I mean? Even once they had achieved it, they got rid of what they felt was a tyrant. And now it's like, well, who should the next tyrant be? It's really fun to watch that part of this movie. And it's great, big, bold. The battle scenes in it, of which there are a few, are pretty cool, but it's the rallies and the speeches and stuff. It's that stuff that is really kind of amazing. And the music, it does have a 70s folk song sort of sensibility to it to some degree. But it mostly, once it gets rolling, it's an old school English chamber drama. But there aren't that many movies made about that era. Of course, it didn't last very long either. It's a complicated, ugly time. There was a fellow actor that came up to Richard Harris and said, no self-respecting Irishman should ever play Oliver Cromwell in a movie. And Richard laughed that off, because his campaign in Ireland was brutal and resulted in thousands of deaths. But Richard saw the thing more allegorical. He sees it as this man of principle who really, the script at least shows that he doesn't want to rule England. He really resists every step of the way overthrowing the king. He sees that as a bad idea in general, but eventually, because of his principles, he's sort of forced to do it. And then he's kind of forced to turn on his compatriots when they decide.
Right.
The scene where they're like, we need a head of state. You've said this yourself, like it's near the end, and the exasperation and frustration, and Harris plays it really, really good.
Yeah.
And it's fun to see. Richard Harris was a fantastic actor who was drunk for most of the 60s and 70s and doesn't really remember making a lot of these movies and stuff. But the era is punctuated. Usually the bigger the role, the more focused and the more integrity he sort of brings to it. Because if he's just brought in to be some guy who wisecracks to Clint Eastwood or whatever, he just does whatever. You could just tell he's winging it. In this film, it's a really wonderful performance. He used to scream his voice raw each day so that there'd be a noticeable audio contrast between how he spoke and Alec Guinness's, what did he call it? Melodicism, I think is the word he used. Because Alec, Obi-Wan, he's
got that smooth, he's got a very smooth timbre to his voice.
If you think of Ewan McGregor, just think of him doing the impression of that, because it's so unlike Ewan's normal voice. It's very, very cool. So it was a cool movie. I was kind of surprised by how cool it was. But it is as far as history lessons go, it's really oversimplifies things to in an attempt to create some sort of David Lean-esque, there's a meaning behind this that, it's not, what's the one with Henry VIII and Thomas More? I can't remember the name of that movie, but it's a play, really.
Yeah.
Man of All Seasons.
Yeah, The Man for All Seasons. Yeah.
Yeah. Is that right?
Yeah, Man for All Seasons. Pretty sure that's
okay. Right. Just checking. Because I get that and a different movie mixed up all the time. Not the movies, but the names. There's a real lesson in that. There's this. We're teaching you a thing. We're teaching you something based on principle here, and this movie goes for that. And it was just too messy a thing, I think, in reality, for it to coalesce into but just based on the sum of its parts, it's really wonderful.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm just in reading some of the stuff here. They did when in the release of the movie, the PR and everything for the movie, all was like, there was 10 years of research that go, it's going in, and then like the people who saw it, who were actual historians, were like, what? No,
not exactly.
Not really. No. But yeah, it is a dramatic.
And we're not just talking about like consolidating battles and this and that, because that they get totally wrong. But you can't really hold that against a movie. It's the politics of it are simplified. It's just there's no way around it. It's as simple as that.
Yep.
And Cromwell is not known as a particularly good ruler, or he had a lot of issues that the film sort of. It certainly doesn't play King Charles as some sort of crazy man who needs to be removed. It's nuanced in that way, in a character way, but in trying to have a unifying theme, it skews a lot of the reality of the situation. I
guess Mark Rylance starred PBS or the BBC, I believe, did a production called Wolf Hall. That was based on
Wolf Hall's, that is Henry VIII, though. That's later, or is it earlier? No, much earlier.
Yeah, it's the rise of Oliver It's Cromwell. No, what was the one?
He plays Thomas Cromwell, which is a different Cromwell.
Oh, that's right.
Along with Cardinal Wolsey, the two kind of main political advisors to Henry VIII when he separated from the Roman Catholic Church.
That's right. All right. Okay. And next up, keeping full on 70s groovy hip. We're gonna do. It's not ABBA's Waterloo, but it is the movie Waterloo.
In the internet database, there's a piece of trivia that was like, this film was released 4 years before ABBA's Waterloo, so it's not to be confused with that. And I'm like, did you really write that? I mean, who would be so bold as to add their own movie trivia to even a wiki trivia page like this and be so stupid about something? I just was kind of flabbergasted by that. And yet 4 people found that comment helpful.
Well, that's good. That's good, because clearly someone was like
68 found it not helpful, but 4 found it helpful.
So I love that. Yeah, someone who was clearly like, when are they gonna mention Agneta? Oh no, this is the movie. I see. Okay.
Oh, I get it. Okay. I understand.
Yes. Click. Helpful.
This movie, much more than Cromwell, this movie blew my mind. Blew my mind. This is an incredible film. I don't want to get into like it's this great film, because it's lacking certain things that you need to be a great film. But the story of Waterloo is Dino De Laurentiis, of all people. Of course, it's Dino. Mm-hmm. We bring him up on the show all the time. It wants to direct this film of the ultimate fall of Napoleon in his second campaign at Waterloo, which is in Belgium, I believe. Is that right? I think so. And they didn't know how to do it. And what happened was the Soviet Socialist Republic Film Bureau stepped up and offered to let them make it there. This is crazy. In 1970, I mean, not the most iconic era of the Cold War, but it very much in the heart of it, in the nuclear era, they agreed to do this. And what the Russian government did and the Russian film industry was they donated to 4,000 or something soldiers that they dressed up in these uniforms and stuff. And they did all this basically for nothing. They did it for free. There was no, say what you want about 70s communism, but there was no sense of we need to make money on this. They weren't used to making money on their own films. They were considered a service to the people. So you get this production values for the time that are off the hook, millions and millions and millions and millions of dollars worth of battle scenes and costuming and props and days and days and days of shooting with this massive amount of people who are all being fed and taken care of. It's just stunning. And I've never seen live action battle sequences like this. It has, bar none, the most impressive version of this in any film made ever with actual people. And I'll just throw in all CGI battles too, because why not? It's real. It's incredible to look at. There's these crazy aerial shots and huge aerial shots where the human carnage just goes on and on and on, and you get this looking at a map sense of strategy of the whole thing. Like, it just took my breath away. The film is, Dino De Laurentiis thinks this film didn't do very well because it was a big flop. It could have been a colossal flop had they actually paid out what you see on screen, but well over half the budget was just donated by the Russian government, or the Soviet government. So it wasn't that big a flop because it wasn't that much a big outlay of the actual people producing the film. But it just, the wheel had turned, and Cromwell and Waterloo, and there's a few more we'll talk about here as we go forward. This just was not the kind of movie the kids were into anymore. It just absolutely wasn't. So none of these from this era, Nicholas and Alexandra, there's this whole list of these, the dying era of that historical epic, and it died for real. It died until they made Braveheart, basically. I mean, there are no 80s historical epics that I can think of. Maybe there's one hidden in there somewhere, but not of this scale and this style until
Stripes, the way Stripes captured that, that prison break from behind.
Of course. Stripes aside, though. But that's a good example of the exception. That's the exception that makes the rule. It's just stunning. Christopher Plummer plays what's the name of the guy?
It is, where's my cast list? Christopher is Arthur Wellesley.
Wellesley, of course, the guy who defeated Napoleon. It's all stiff British upper lip. Like these characters that are running this stuff for England are impenetrable. They're in a great way because they really do represent that gentleman's, war bringers in this way that it was really very true of the time. Everything is decorum and everything's this. It's just like, it's amazing. There's a scene where, to motivate his troops, Napoleon rides through the front lines on his horse. We've seen this in a lot of different movies from a lot of different eras. And there's this guy behind him, and he's like, "Sir, as the emperor has shown himself, may we have permission to fire a shot?" And Plummer doesn't even look at him. He just goes, and I don't even remember the exact lines, but it's like, absolutely not. That's what uncivilized idea is that? You forget that it could have saved thousands and thousands of lives if they would have killed him. It just, the idea of the break in decorum is completely intolerable to a guy like Wellesley. It's really, I find that enjoyable. There's nothing I love better than English stiff upper lip stoicism, and I just I find it incredibly amazing. I always find it psychologically super interesting. And whenever it shows up on screen, a lot of people are like, oh, it's wooden, or oh, they don't, he doesn't give the big speech or whatever.
Right.
Which he doesn't, but it's still outstanding performance. And I thought although I guess it gained a lot of criticism, I thought Rod Steiger as Napoleon was fantastic.
Yeah, it's got a really great cast. You mentioned Christopher Plummer and Rod Steiger, Orson Welles playing King Louis XVIII, and
getting his $1 million on for about 4 minutes of screen time.
Yeah, Rupert Davies, looking at some of the other, Dan O'Hurley.
Jack Hawkins is in it.
Jack Hawkins, yeah.
Jack Hawkins lost his voice in the late 60s, and the British film industry was very cool. They kept casting him and stuff and just overdubbing him, which we wouldn't do that today.
Oh, yeah.
That we were not super into overdubbing people today anyway, but whereas back then that was very common.
Before
he was overdubbed in this film by Robert Riety, who's one of the maybe the all-time greatest voice talent behind the scenes of this style of movie. And apparently he did 40 or something speaking parts because during the battle scenes, they really had no usable audio of any kind. And the battle scenes are really, really extensive. So
real quick. I can't remember if you said the amount. It's 15,000 extras that were used.
I believe it. It's on screen.
And it's and it's apparently it still is the record for most amount of extras in a movie. Before the Russian financing, before the whole everything with the USSR came in, the Soviets, apparently Dino De Laurentiis wanted, or at least was in talks to have John Huston direct this one. It would have been fit. Yeah, that would have been really interesting.
That would have been, although it's directed within an inch of its life by whoever directed it. Who's the
Sergei Bondarchuk?
There you go. I mean, it really is spectacle on a scale of which, and even just the scenes at court and the early scenes. There's a ballroom scene where just a few nights before the English officers are hanging out with their aristocratic wives and stuff, and it's this moving camera, just gorgeous thing. The film is super superficial, but that when you achieve visual spectacle on this scale, who cares? It doesn't matter. It's just it's not a 3-hour long beast of a film. It's a touch over 2 hours, and it goes by quick. And if you get a chance to see Waterloo and this is your kind of thing, I highly recommend it. It just is amazing.
Very cool. All right.
So how many bodies can you fit? I mean, that's the task. How many clowns can you get in a Volkswagen Beetle? How many people can you get in even a Panavision frame, even in a helicopter or on a hill in the distance? It's like Joel said, you feel it breaking these records repeatedly as you're watching it. And the fact that they're people, you compare it to, and I love these movies, but you compare it to like the opening to Fellowship of the Ring, where they're not people, and the difference is profound. It is profound what the awe that realism brings to the party, and it's just a reminder of that.
Right. Like I think of the scene in Gone with the Wind, where it's panning back, and it's the carnage after. It's the "I'll never go hungry again" speech, I believe. Right. And it's. And it's just a sea of people, but you can tell that most of them are just they're just dummies that are just laying there.
You can kind of tell that's still an impressive shot from the history of movies. But
I mean, yes. I think that was. I mean, and that was probably. I mean, I don't. I off the top of my head, I'm sure D.W. Griffith and Cecil B. DeMille, I'm sure some of their big giant epics, they had, big pullback scenes and stuff like that too. But that's the one that I really remember as sort of like the first time seeing this sort of look at the scale of war, you know, or at least the carnage of war.
Yeah.
But all right, so the very next year we get a movie called The Last Valley with Michael Caine. You get to do your Michael Caine.
No, I don't, because Michael Caine speaks with a German accent in this film.
Oh, bummer.
No, that's incredible. At some point,
I just mean it's a bummer that we don't get to hear your Michael Caine.
You don't get to hear my Michael Caine?
Yeah.
No, I can't.
Can you do Michael Caine doing German?
I can't do Michael Caine doing German. I just can't do it. So it's sorry. He'll come up again in this show and in the future. That's part of what's cool about this. You know, Michael Caine in Zulu, where he plays an aristocrat. It's very weird listening to Michael Caine with Christopher Plummer's voice, essentially. In this, he plays a German mercenary during the 30 Years' War. There are, that I'm aware of, no films about the 30 Years' War but this. And in that way alone, it's sort of significant. But the fun thing is with this film is that this is a profound film. I was kind of amazed by it. It's a little old-fashioned, but it is not. It's the opposite of Waterloo. It's not meant to be about war. The Last Valley is this valley that, because of its remoteness, is untouched by the carnage of this war, where all the lords are fighting, and it's ostensibly was a war between Christianity or between, you know, the Reformation, Lutherans and whatever, and Catholics, but it just wasn't. It was about grudges between rich people, and they're using their serfs. It was about fighting men, being able to sell their services to the highest bidder. That's the kind of character that Caine plays in it. But he comes into this town, and his first instinct isn't to sack the town, which is what you do. You ride into a town, kill everybody there, rape all the women, take all the riches, and move on to the next town. Mm-hmm. And it almost didn't matter if the town was Catholic or was whatever. This was just destruction going on all around them. Because of the remoteness of this village, and because winter is coming, Caine decides, or is partly convinced, not to sack the town and to just hang out there. So then all these weird relationships start brewing between, primarily between Omar Sharif, who's, again, Omar Sharif's really, really good. And this is the kind of character where he's a really modern actor for maybe not 71 or whatever, but just watch him through the years. He watch him compared to Peter O'Toole, watch him compared to Charlton Heston. He's just this natural modern actor. You know, we talked a little bit about Richard Burton. He's a little bit more demonstrative as an actor, but he also he just feels like a guy that could be in a movie today and you would accept it. Stephen Boyd, I've got a whole list of favorites who aren't necessarily the huge stars of the day, but were awesome and would fit in today's acting style. Omar is the prince of that style of acting. He's just outstanding. Yeah. And him and Michael Caine are fantastic together. They're arguing about the philosophy of war, and it's a deep movie with a lot of meaning, with a lot of really tragic, awful, terrible things that happen in it. You know, what the cost of the thing was it's laid out really, really good for you. This was a film I'd never heard of until Kino Lorber put it out on Blu-ray. And I was like, look, it's like a widescreen historical film with Michael Caine and Omar Sharif. And who's the English actor who plays the sort of mayor of the town or the head rich guy of the town? Really good actor from
Nigel Davenport.
Yeah, Nigel Davenport. He's also outstanding. He's kind of the women play an important role in this film too, but he's kind of it's the three guys and their various ambitions and plans that the thing rotates around.
Yeah.
I don't know what to say. Hopefully I've sold it well. It's a thoughtful film. There are not a bunch of battles in it. There's certainly violence in it, but it's not a war movie. And that also surprised me because I was expecting more of the same. And it isn't that at all. It's it's something much more meditative and interesting, and I adored it for that reason.
Very cool. Yeah. All right, next up is one of my favorite character names. Boone, the story of Boone Hagenbeck in the Rivers.
The
Reavers, yeah.
Okay, the Reavers, again, I won't say much about this either. The Reavers is based on a William Faulkner novel. It's an interesting time capsule of, Faulkner, who was writing in the early 20th century, and a film shot in 1971 about that sort of topic. It's sort of the same reaction you have, I think, watching like a Mark Twain adaptation from the same era. There's this Faulkner and Twain compared to the authors of their time, and I think even by modern standards, were enlightened with regards to sexual politics and with regards to racial politics, both of which were really, really sensitive things at the time they were writing, and are sensitive to this day. This is always tricky stuff to take on. One of the neat things about this film is that this one of the central relationships between Steve McQueen and his traveling buddy, who's an African American, is they're at each other's throats all the time, and so the N-word is being dropped and all this stuff is happening, and that may ruffle some feathers with modern sensibilities. But the incredible thing between the two guys is that they really, while McQueen's character knows that his sidekick isn't his equal in society, he still treats him like his friend, who could punch him out, who could steal his car, who can do all this stuff. Mm-hmm. And they're, you know what I mean? And they work it out together. Like, that's interesting to me. It's also a sort of a weird coming of age story where the two of them bring this kid to Kansas. No, where are they even? Some big town, relatively. Kansas City, I want to say.
Memphis.
Memphis. Okay, there you go. Yeah. So, and he gets to experience prostitution and gambling and alcohol, all this stuff for the first time. And yet the whole thing, it's narrated by Burgess Meredith. It has a fucking brilliant early John Williams musical score. Really elevates the film. It's good. It's a good movie, but it always is weird when you travel back. Just watching the musical version of Huck Finn, from that era that I talked about many episodes ago, you feel queasy over the racial stuff that's going on in these films. The 70s-ness of them is weird, and the 1905-ness of them is weird. It's like, you know what I mean? Both things working on you is really interesting to me. Storytelling, especially comedy, but storytelling's not evergreen. And I try, sometimes I find stuff objectionable. And sometimes you can kind of say, well, think about what this is and the intention behind this. And sometimes you can't. And this movie, you could. It's an interesting movie. They don't film Faulkner very much because even though he's a master novelist, people into literature and stuff think some of them think he's the best American novelist ever. Mm-hmm. But his novels are so based on language, and you know what I mean? It's like, it's tough to get on screen. And I would say that The Reavers is a pretty good, a pretty accomplished way they did it. And it's one of Faulkner's, even though it's got plenty of like stuff in it I just said, it's one of his winsome sort of looking back. It's from a child's point of view. The child, even though the child gets in a knife fight and all this stuff happens, it's like, it's still Burgess Meredith's. It almost plays like a, I don't know. It plays like this sweet memoried coming of age story. It's interesting. That's not what all of Faulkner is about. So that part made it interesting to me. It was made by former actor Mark Rydell, who we're going to talk about another film that he made around the same time.
Yep. This was, you mentioned John Williams in the score, and we love to talk about John Williams. And it's
here it comes, baby.
This was his
Western score.
Well,
really,
no, I mean,
is only one
the,
that I'm aware of.
The Reavers was he was nominated for an Academy Award, and Rupert Cross as Ned was also nominated for an Academy
Rupert
Award.
Cross, the African American gentleman I'm talking about, who I seen him in one other thing, but for a guy who got an Oscar nomination for that film, it's weird that he was the first African American nominated for Best Supporting Actor, I believe.
I think you're right on that. But
obviously not the first African American nominated and not the first to win, but in that category, he was the first.
Yep. Next up, yes, again, we're mentioned. This is John Williams's
Western score,
but
as good as the Reavers score is, this score.
Yeah, and it's 1972.
It's like worthy of Aaron Copland for real. It's stunningly good music. It's amazing.
Yep,
it's
1972, The Cowboys.
Yeah, The Cowboys is a John Wayne movie. Just a tip for everybody out there. If you're ever going to buy a John Wayne movie, my recommendation is that you buy it from eBay. Because just searching for a John Wayne movie on Amazon will have Amazon trying to sell you John Wayne movies for the next 2 decades.
And probably any other John Wayne paraphernalia will start popping up.
Damn you, cookies. Actually, you can go back in your search history and delete it. You could do that. But I'm just saying, be careful, because I've got, I think, 4 John Wayne movies. I'm hardly a John Wayne fan. I mean,
yeah.
And I don't even, and it's funny because the ones I have are like The Longest Day and this one. They're not even the ones where you'd say, oh, those are his best must-have John Ford, whatever movies.
Yeah.
They're this weird sort of sidetracked films of his. About to get In Harm's Way. Thank you, Dr. Maz. We appreciate it. That's coming out this summer. But The Cowboys, is the story of this rancher who all of his ranch hands have left him for another richer rancher. And he's got to do this cattle drive, and he gets it in his head. It takes a while to convince him, but he gets it in his head that he can do it with these kids, basically, these roughly 12-year-old-ish children. And he teaches them, and it's really fun. John Wayne, again, Mark Rydell, who made the Reavers and who made this, he feels like he's an old-fashioned filmmaker, but he's a very young man when he was making these films, and he isn't an old-fashioned filmmaker. He really is the new breed of 70s filmmaker, and he brings that sort of feel to the thing, and yet you still have a Western with John Wayne, and Bruce Dern plays the bad guy in it, and a couple of the kids have gone on to be I don't want to say stars, but accomplished actors. Robert Carradine, A. Martinez is in it. Amazing to see him in a film of this type. He's really, really great. The kids are fantastic, very real on screen, and the music just takes you away, and the sort of breathtaking shots of the cattle drive. And it's an old-fashioned film with a sort of devastating twist to it, which I won't spoil, but I think a lot of people maybe know The Cowboys. But I think even people who aren't John Wayne fans can look at this and see that it's more than another John Wayne Western. And John Wayne knew this. It's a comment on the Western genre, basically with a very modern sensibility. And I really like it for that. I think it was some famous film critic was all like, this isn't a coming of age story. It's about the story of a bunch of kids turning into cold-blooded murderers. Well, I don't remember who wrote that. I wish I could. I guess it's good that I can't, because then I can't blame anybody for saying that. But it's a famous critic who's a big pussy, by the way, because it is that. But, welcome to the Old West. I mean, what movies have you been watching, dude? It is that, but that's kind of awesome too. I really like The Cowboys, and I had never seen it until just a few years ago. I knew it pretty well. I'd seen bits of it on television, so I knew the twist. But John Wayne, Bruce Dern, name a couple of the other adults that are in it.
Sorry, I was trying to find that critic. I think the critic that said that might have been where. Oh, I just had it right here.
It's the guy the guy who publishes all those movies.
Oh, was it Leonard Maltin said that?
I'm pretty sure.
Oh, okay.
I'm pretty sure.
Yeah, Roscoe Lee Brown
Oh, he's great in it.
Yeah, Slim Pickens.
Of course. What's a Western without Slim Pickens?
Right. Lonnie Chapman.
Yeah. So, really good stuff. Really good stuff. And John Wayne was really, apparently, it was a different type of project for him. He jumped his cue on a really complicated river crossing scene when cameras weren't rolling. And this was early on in shooting where they were doing all that kind of complicated stuff first. That's kind of how you do these. And then you break it down to scenes once everybody knows each other and, has some chemistry together. And Rydell just in front of the world and everybody just ripped him to pieces. John Wayne, and Wayne was like, he went away and what's the story? Rydell's like, and the crew and a couple of the actors kept coming up to me and they were like, "Hey, it was good working with you," because they just assumed he was going to be fired the next day.
Yep.
Yeah, and Wayne came back to work on time the next day and was like, "Hey, privately, but still, hey, you were right to do that. I just want you to know that I'm really excited to be in the movie and all this." It was in the character too. This part of this lives in the character. He's a bit of a humbled guy. And I love that about it. And there's stories upon stories of the shooting of this. He was challenging Bruce Dern constantly, and Bruce was up to the challenge. He would not sort of back down from Wayne's thing. And so the confrontations that the two have in the film is fantastic because of that. You really feel that. It's not tension. You almost feel like they're buddies challenging each other, even though there's real danger in those scenes.
Yeah.
So it's an unsung film. Mark Rydell should be proud of himself. That's a really cool movie, and not your standard John Wayne fare, and yet it kind of is too. You kind of get the best of both worlds with it.
Yeah,
and if you've never heard, I've seen that, go to YouTube right now. If you've never heard John Williams' theme to the Cowboys, it's special music. I got to see him with the Boston Pops play that suite. It's about 9 minutes long. You don't have to listen to the whole 9 minutes, but I got to hear him play that live, and it was just knocks you out.
Very cool.
Yeah.
All right. Next up from 1973, Scarecrow.
Another movie that I've seen on the video shelves for years and years and years, but for whatever reason, I didn't rent this when I was a kid. There was a time when I was a kid where I just, somewhere when I was a teenager, I'm like, well, I haven't seen these. I got to see The Godfather, and I just started renting Pacino and Robert Duvall and Gene Hackman movies and Dustin Hoffman movies and just watching them all. And I ran out of gas a little bit with that, because you start with the best ones and then you kind of work your way down, and eventually you're like, some of these suck. But that truly golden era of Hollywood cinema, this film isn't included in that. I guess it's a much more modest movie, but I should have seen it at that time. Al Pacino and Gene Hackman in a road movie. It really feels like they're hitchhiking during the Depression, but it takes place in the current time. It takes place in the early 70s. But it just has this sort of Steinbeck kind of quality to it that is really amazing. And Hackman and Pacino, man, I don't know what to say. They're at the height of their powers here. This is the first movie Pacino did after The Godfather, and the first one he did before he did Dog Day Afternoon and Godfather 2. So he's just as good as he ever was, period. Yeah. And Hackman also, just was about to do The Conversation, had just done French Connection. So it's right in this magic zone. It's directed by Jerry Schatzberg. It's a more modest film, but holy Moses, is it good. The chemistry between those two guys and the pathology and just the brave way they tell the 70s films would tell the stories of these flawed people and sort of let them happen, if that makes any sense. Mm-hmm. There's this great scene. It's all done in one shot. There's a lot of diner and restaurant scenes as they travel, but the first diner scene is it's like a time jump scene. They go from like not wanting to talk to each other and being paranoid of each other to sitting at a diner counter talking about how they're going to open this car wash together. And you don't even see what happens in between. And normally I'd be like, what are you doing? You're robbing us of this great stuff. But it works brilliantly.
Yeah.
just if they have that isolated, I mean, you can just watch that scene out of context, them at the diner counter. Hackman has this incredible ad lib. You can tell this waitress keeps coming by and putting everything like out of order and in the wrong place, and they've got to keep reaching over each other. And Pacino's kind of doing it like while he's acting, and you can tell Hackman's getting really thrown off by it. And he kind of utters to her, "Is this your first day?" And you can tell that that's based on reality. You can tell that he's annoyed with the actor, and yet it plays perfectly with the character as well. It's scene after scene after scene of that. It's a bit of a downbeat film.
Yeah.
But it's stunning. Hackman was asked, "What's your favorite movie that you've ever done?" He goes, "Well," he gives this sort of rote answer where you can't pick a favorite. They're like your children.
Mm-hmm.
But there was this film called Scarecrow. And that's in the ... He just let it sit there and linger there. And that was the one he called out by name. He's as good in it as he's ever was in anything. Yeah. Pacino's a great foil for them. Apparently they were foils in real life. Hackman liked to get real quiet and focus on his work and sort of meditate before a scene started. And Pacino liked to start bouncing off the walls and hype himself up. And like just the difference between that alone it's on the screen and it's magical. So I highly Scarecrow is the best movie, or maybe the second best movie on this whole list. It's really, really, really good.
Yeah.
And Warner Archives have restored it and put it out there. It's on, there's a Blu-ray of it that looks immaculate. I assume the broadcast version is the same version. So
this is one that I'm not familiar with. I'm reading that it won the Grand Prix at Cannes and then, but yet it didn't do well. It didn't do well at all, which is strange.
I don't know why movies like it did, Alice Doesn't Live Here Anymore. These sort of rustic, like they did pretty good. So I'm not sure why this one failed to, especially with these two stars in it, because it really is the film. I mean, they're not the stars they became in whatever the 80s or 90s, where they were movie stars and they almost couldn't get out of their own way as actors. But we're just in the biggest movies ever, just in the previous years, and they were the hottest thing out there. It should have been great. I liked it better than Papillon, which is another buddy road trip movie that is really good, but I like this relationship better. I found it more interesting. You know what I mean? I just thought it was really, really, really good. Both of them listed amongst their favorite performances. As I say, Hackman answered, if you can only pick one, he answered with this. And even though it might have been a tense sort of experience for them making it, the results are on the screen. It really is special. So,
all right. So next up, we are going to go back a few years to 1969, and in going back to 1969, we are going to go way back to King Henry VIII and Anne of 1,000 Days.
These are the two Charles Giroux costume dramas. Basically, we got two in a row. Anne of 1,000 Days, Richard Burton. We were just talking about him playing Henry VIII. Good role for him. There was criticism at the time, he's not fat enough or whatever. But if John Rhys, whatever, who played him in The Tudors can play him, surely Richard Burton in a heavy cloak is good enough for me.
Yeah.
And it's great because Richard doesn't play him like the clueless, bouncy, fat, I just want what I want kind of guy. He's a much more complex character in his hands. But what really surprised me was Geneviève Bujold, a French-Canadian actress who we talked about on the show. We talked about her with Earthquake and Coma, and she was in all kinds of things. She's a good actor. Swashbuckler in our pirate episode, we talked about her. She's a gorgeous lady, plays Anne Boleyn in it, and she's really good in it. Part of what motivated her was Elizabeth Taylor was hanging around talking smack about her on the set constantly.
Yeah.
And she's just a kid compared to these titans of stage and screen, you know? And apparently Taylor insisted on being on the set in the kind of final confrontation between our two heroes in the tower. Just, you know, divorced, beheaded, died, divorced, beheaded, survived. That's the six wives of Henry VIII. Anne Boleyn was beheaded. Spoiler alert for the film, but you know, found guilty of incest and adultery and just asinine charges that totally weren't true. And to the point that even though the king wanted her, maybe it's questionable as to whether he really wanted her beheaded, but he wanted her removed. He wanted the marriage absolved so that he could move on to the next person. That's certain. They were still taking bets. They were so well defended at court during their trial, her and her brother, and she was so clever about it that they were literally betting on whether they would be found innocent, which, given that the king wanted them found guilty, was an absurd thing to be betting on at the time. Right. So that's a fun little historical nugget that I kind of enjoy. It's a good telling of that story. That story's been told many, many times. It's decent. It's an old-fashioned costume drama. It's got all the trappings you'd expect. But the thing that really makes it is it's sort of the first version of the story where Anne is given a chance to have some sense of herself.
Sure. And
Genevieve carries that wonderfully. In that final confrontation with Liz Taylor somewhere off in the shadows behind camera, Genevieve goes at him and breaks him on screen. You just can see it. And Burton is a generous enough and excellent enough actor that he lets that happen. There's no sort of movie star dignity that he has to uphold. He responds to it. And it's just powerful. It's really, really powerful. And so it's worth mentioning for that reason. I've never seen Genevieve better. I enjoy her as an actor because she's easy on the eyes and she plays the emotional reality of the situation. Like, she's just good at acting. Yeah. But I've never seen her just take stage amongst these English titans and just so thoroughly dominate them. It makes the whole movie, even though it's not written as some sort of feminist manifesto, it lends that point of view to it in an extremely powerful way.
Sure. Originally, that role was supposed to be played by Olivia Hussey, since we brought her up last week.
Who would have been great because she has a different sort of thing about her but it wouldn't have been the same. Olivia Hussey would have played the conventional Anne Boleyn from the ballads of yore, the one that we're used to that gets caught up in this mess. And
dumb little bit of trivia. She was supposed to play it, and she was also offered to be in True Grit. And then she made some under her breath, like at a party, and the producer offered her essentially both roles, and she was like, I don't really see myself with John Wayne. Oof. And the guy was like, nope, I take them both.
I take them back.
I take them back. And so that's a dumb little thing. But next up is Mary, Queen of Scots.
A couple of years later, same exact crew, director, everything. We talked about the remake of this that they made a couple of years ago on one of our end of season shows with Margot Robbie and Saoirse Ronan, and how bummed out and disappointed I was by that movie. Because that's the kind of movie I really, really want to like, And this was great. It was great to see it's Gina Rowlands. Is that right? Who's the
no, Vanessa Redgrave.
Vanessa Redgrave for sure and then
Glenda Jackson.
Glenda Jackson. Thank you. Sorry.
Okay,
again, I don't get the actors mixed up. I get the names mixed up sometimes. I apologize. Wow. Holy Vanessa Redgrave. Saoirse Ronan's as good an actor as is acting today, but I just felt like that film's modern sensibilities just kept getting in its way. A lot like that version of Emma that we talked about. Like, it's not a bad movie by any stretch. It's just It's just too bold for its own good. It doesn't, you don't feel the weight of the times of the thing in it because it's sort of its own thing. This film, it's the same story. It's the exact same story. It feels like the script is, a lot of it is the same. It has the same fantasy of these two characters who surely never met in person. The film culminates with a meeting between them. And the meeting between them in this is, it's what it should be. It's what it should have been in that other film. Yes, they can relate to each other, surely, as queens of people, but they're at odds together. Queen Elizabeth was desperate not to execute Queen Mary. Her court didn't agree with her. The people sure as hell didn't agree with her. But she just felt a queen killing a queen was then it could happen to any of us. Then what, then what am I saying? It was this, my cousin, I can't,
it would be opening Pandora's box.
It's a huge conscience, crisis of conscience for her. And that's in the later version, but in this version, that's the whole thing that the film culminates with. And it's just outstanding by those two actors and all the guys around them, trying to twist and pull them in all directions. And it was a wonderful costume drama. I enjoyed it a lot.
Yeah. Terrific.
And those two films, different histories, although not dramatically different. The film ends with Anne, before her execution, saying it's Elizabeth that will be queen. I've made my mark here, and I don't know the exact phrase, but Genevieve's like every drop of my blood spilt will have been worth it, or just something. Some just rage at the moon speech. I love it. It's old fashioned, but I love it. I love it. And then the very next movie, you see her. She was right.
Yeah,
that's cool.
All right. So in 1965, there was a very popular movie called "Those Magnificent Men and Their Flying Machines," and so in '69, they
wanted to make a movie called Monte Carlo or Broke
or Bust. Monte Carlo or Bust. But in America, you can't have those magnificent men and their flying machines and then have a sequel
with Monte Carlo
or Bust. No, you have to call it Those Daring Young Men in Their Jaunty Jalopies.
Jimmy, just listening to Jimmy Durante sing Jalopies, and the opening theme song is one of the funnest things you'll experience. I didn't love Those Magnificent Men and Their Flying Machines. I was impressed by the aerials and stuff, but I thought it was a little staid, and I thought the sped up Benny Hill like humor didn't really work on me, but I still liked it. I like a big old fashioned film, and there's nothing quite like an aerial race from London to Paris or whatever with these old, single made out of balsa wood planes and stuff. That was interesting. This movie though, and it's only for a couple of reasons. There's only a couple things that differentiate it from that movie. This movie isn't as good or as accomplished, but it had me laughing the whole time. I would laugh, and I started watching it going, oh my God, it gets off to a really bad start. It's got this whole prologue sequence. I won't say what it is, but it gets off to a bad start. All I can say is, hang in there. When it settles into the race, it's actually pretty fun.
Yeah.
The thing that made it so magical, well, one, Tony Curtis, who I'm always ripping on, he's the anti, right, Richard Burton, Stephen Boyd. He's the movie star guy who just is this movie star and can't be anything else. He can't tell an honest story because he just can't not be Tom Curtis, the movie star. You know what I mean? I don't know how to explain it. He's Tony Curtis, whatever. He's a legend. Nothing I say is going to change that.
Right.
He's delightful in this. Apparently the director hated him because of his movie star ego nonsense, but he's very self-deprecating and extremely fun in it. And it helps him and his co-star have one of these, on-screen, off-screen affairs during the film. Their chemistry is very real on screen. I enjoyed that. But the two guys that make this film are Peter Cook and Dudley Moore.
Right.
My God in heaven. I've known these guys were partners for a long time. Obviously, Joel knows them from being the authors of the famous play, Good Evening.
Good Evening.
Which I don't crack a smile in whatsoever when I watch it. I found that totally stupid. But these are guys who are like cabaret performers. They were stage comedy routine dudes. They were the British version of Jerry Lewis and what's the drunk guy's name? I can't remember.
Dean Martin.
Yeah, except they're super, super funny. They're so funny. I couldn't stand it. Peter Cook plays this stiff upper lip British guy, and Dudley Moore plays his sidekick, Lieutenant Darrington, I think is his name. Holy crap, they're funny.
Yeah, Barrington and Dawlish.
And they have this kitted out Inspector Gadget like car with all these crazy gizmos and hidden compartments and stuff. Every time they're on screen, it is so fun. So really just for them, just to see two comic geniuses who, at least in film, didn't cross paths much. And when they did, weren't allowed to just be a comic duo because they were always in movies together, even when they were together, that were a little more down to earth or had to be. Jaunty Jalopies is a clown show. Gert Frobe, the German actor, actually says, "I have a mind to kick you in your strudelpuss." He actually says he's going to kick somebody in the strudelpuss. This is an actual German guy who was being made to say this in a movie. For what that crosses a line. It crosses a line between cheesy madcap comedy into pure absurdity, and that's where my funny bone gets tickled somehow. So it made a difference. I'm just saying, fun, widescreen travelogue, outstanding special effects. This film was directed by Ken Anakin, who made Swiss Family Robinson and some war films and stuff. He's an expert visualist. There's a scene where the car is, where Curtis's car is teetering off a cliff with the girl climbing around in it, trying to keep it from tipping over, and him hanging from the bottom of it. And then to make that even more impossible to look good on screen, they put this ravine with a running river and a waterfall behind him. Water in optical composites, without getting too technical, is impossible. It looks stupid in Phantom Menace, so they had to cut the waterfall scene in it basically from the film because they just couldn't make it look right. Mm-hmm. This is a rear projection. It's a mix of stuff, and you can tell it's an effect. It doesn't look like he's really hanging from a cliff, but it looks beautiful and magical. It's really fun.
Yeah.
So it has a lot of those sort of gags in it too. It's it's a total throwback story. It's racially inappropriate, and it's sort of misogynistic in the way everything from that era was. But sure. I really, really enjoyed it, and I really enjoyed Peter Cook and Dudley Moore.
Awesome.
And they've gone, this one movie, they've gone from, oh yeah, those guys, to I love them both dearly. It just completely changed I've loved like Dudley, I love him in Foul Play, and I love him in other things, but I get it now. I get it. I've seen them together in this car with the background process going, just doing their stuff, saying whatever comes to their mind. That natural chemistry, every word out of their mouths is delightful. I love it. There's this scene where they have a chase across a hockey game on a frozen lake, them and the German car, and it's just so funny. Dudley Moore, "Sir, I think we're mucking up their game." Just that sort of thing.
Yep.
Well, it's whatever, if they were playing, they should be playing something more civilized like cricket or whatever. It's just, I loved it. So there you go.
Very funny.
I was stunned to love it because I didn't even like the original, which everyone agrees is superior.
Right.
But here we are.
All right. So next up, you have these next three films listed in under a neutral category.
Yeah, let's blow through them because I'm taking too much time with these movies.
Great. So I'll just give you all three of these titles, and then you can quick talk about them. The Black Windmill, the Neptune Factor.
Michael Caine. That's Michael Caine, where he actually speaks with his typical accent. Yep. He plays a spy whose son gets kidnapped, and he has a certain set of skills. So you can imagine how that sorts of stuff. That was not a bad movie. Don Siegel, who directed the first Dirty Harry and some other rather iconic American films, directed it, and it's okay, but I didn't love it. Mm-hmm. Black Windmill with Michael Caine.
Yeah, Black Windmill, and then the Neptune Factor.
Oh, I should have saved this for the next show because I have a lot to say about Neptune Factor.
Well, let's skip
Neptune Factor is a deep sea rescue film that is really cooking along pretty great until you get to the last act, and then they, in Fantastic Voyage style, they have all these monsters that appear at the bottom of the sea, and the monsters are just aquarium fish blown up and put in rear projection process outside the portals of this sub, and it ruins the whole thing. It's weird. It's too bad. But I liked a lot of it, but I should have known that was going to happen, but I didn't even know. So I was just like, what? And then I went online and I'm like, people are like, yeah, the dentist office fish, outside the windows that are as big as a house, not super effective or scary and really not needed at all in this story. So it kind of ruins the whole thing. Daniel Petrie directed that.
And then 1972's The New Centurions.
That was a pretty good movie. It was weird. That movie was sold as a movie about cops by a cop, which was a weird cop worshiping story, just with what's going on in the world today in our town and elsewhere. It was weird to watch a movie like that. But George C. Scott, Stacy Keach, it reminded me of those early gritty episodes of Hill Street Blues. It's really, really good. It really does it's a time capsule. Obviously it's early 70s, but it really does sort of get to the psychology of what these guys were. Stacy Keach plays a law student who's serving time as a cop because he's into criminology, but it's become his, being a police officer has become his sort of addiction, and the rest of his life is sort of going to pot over it. Scott plays the wise old sage cop who's, about to retire. I had a mixed reaction to that because it was a weird movie to be watching at this time, but that's actually a really good, thoughtful movie. Just really thoughtful compared to what I thought it was going to be. New Centurions. I was sort of impressed with it.
Interesting.
It's a downer. It's a super downer. You got pimps and hookers. The black people in the movie are very 70s blaxploitation cliches. So there's stuff in it that you just, that take it down a peg in my mind. But again, it's not unlike any other films from that era in that way. They're not all. And at the same time, the way the cops view this stuff is interesting in the film. So,
okay, you have
it's not all black and white. No pun intended.
You have these next three films lumped together with just a little, negative note on here.
I hated them.
Yeah. Okay. So The Light at the Edge of the World from 71.
Terrible. Yul Brynner plays a pirate who kidnaps the lighthouse at the tip of Argentina at Cape Horn, where Kirk Douglas is one of the guys manning it. And it has this sort of Captain Nemo insanity about it, but it for a G-rated movie, it's got this bloodbath where they murder this entire passenger ship that comes to shore. It's done in quick takes and stuff, like trying to sort of emulate Hitchcock, but it's just the implied death is terrible. The implied rape is terrible.
Wow.
Jules Verne, Kirk Douglas, Yul Brynner, right? Where at the tip of Argentina? That sounds interesting.
Rated G.
I don't know what Jules' story is. It was published posthumously, but the movie is not good.
Rated G for good. Next one is The Killer Elite.
Peckinpah.
Yeah, Sam Peckinpah.
I'm not a huge Sam Peckinpah fan. Sorry, big time film fans out there. his characters are a little too just sort of outwardly cheesily masculine for me, and I have a hard time relating to them.
Wait, cheesily masculine, and it stars James Caan? What?
James Caan and Robert Duvall, right? You should like it because of that. I mean, that's the draw, actually. Yeah. And their early scenes where they're pals, spoiler alert for the Killer Elite, are good. It sort of fulfills that promise, but when they kind of split sides, it could be worse. You know, the whole middle of the thing is Khan rehabbing, essentially. That's not what I expected from a film of this type. It tries to be a sensitive movie, but the elements aren't there to make one. It was remade with Jason Statham a few years ago. It's equally bad.
Yeah, there you go. And then
it feels like the Jason Statham crappy movie of its era, honestly, when you're watching it. So
sure. All right, and then the 1971's Duck You Sucka, or also known as A Fistful of Dynamite.
It's funny that Fistful of Dynamite, the ripoff name, is actually the better title than Duck You Sucka. I don't know who that was supposed to sell to.
Yeah, Duck You Sucker, and then
it's James Coburn's catchphrase in the movie. I'll just say it. I'm burying it in the middle of this episode because I don't want the blowback, but I don't like Bernardo Bertolucci, and I do not like Sergio Leone. Period. Right. I can say that officially now. This film was the final nail in the Sergio Leone coffee. I know Once Upon a Time in the West and Once Upon a Time in America.
This was
Good, the Bad,
another
the Ugly,
title.
Blah, blah, blah.
Another title for this one was Once Upon a Time, The Revolution.
My God in heaven. Well, it's an accomplished film. Sergio is a brilliant filmmaker when it comes to the work that he does behind the camera, but I'm not into that stuff. I'm Italian guys. I'm sorry. If your main character like rapes somebody at some point, I'm off team whoever that guy is. You know, and that's a thing where I really don't think that's the sexual politics of the 70s or of the whatever Mexican Revolution. You can't. Robert De Niro rapes Elizabeth McGovern in Once Upon a Time in America, and then it's just back to the movie. How is that remotely acceptable? I mean, maybe okay, your guy's a rapist, but how am I supposed to accept him as anything but a rapist at a certain point? I can't. I guess that's where I draw the line. You know, I can handle the hookers and I can handle the parade of worthless female secretaries in these films that are, you know, they're not very nuanced. They're not a lot of women in them. And when they are, the women aren't, you know, they're not like the women I grew up with and know today who I would not mess about with. And that's weird, but it's kind of like you have to accept that when you're watching old movies. I don't have to accept rape, period. I don't have to accept it. You guys can go to hell. Seriously, Bernardo Bertolucci. Leone's dead, but Bertolucci can just bite it. I hate that crap. I hate it. And I just saying it out loud. So there you go.
Well, there you go. All right. So then next up, then we get, these are two actually kind of classic movies. They Shoot Horses, don't they?
If Scarecrow is not the best movie on this list, this is the best movie. Yeah. I knew what this movie was. Obviously the name is iconic, the name alone. Yeah. I'm a big Sidney Pollack fan, but this is another film where it's this Panavision film. It's this super widescreen, tricky visual film, and I just kind of refused to watch it because I didn't, first off, I didn't watch it when I was a kid, which I would have accepted whatever. And then when I became a film fan, I just sort of refused to watch it in some super compromised way. So finally came out again in high definition just recently. This movie's amazing movie.
Yeah.
I don't know what to say. They shoot horses, don't they? It's maybe Pollack's best film. It's about this grueling, terrible Depression era dance contest. And it's based on a very famous novel, and it is sort of it's a metaphor and an allegory for all this stuff. There's all this extra weight lifted on it, but just the nature of the thing. What the tagline for the movie was, people are the greatest spectacle, or is that what it is? People
are the ultimate spectacle.
It's a dance contest that goes on for days and days.
With this disco, this weird disco ball with people with agonized faces of people, sort of in this disco ball.
Jane Fonda stars in it, but there are people that I know that in it that it just blew my mind. Jane Fonda's great in it, as you would expect.
Yep.
Bonnie Bedelia is amazing in it. If it's not her first movie, it's one of her first movies. There's a scene where Bonnie Bedelia, after days of exhaustion, she's pregnant in the movie in this dance contest. Which is a visual stunt, but it's a really affecting one. It really is disturbing. Where she's standing, disheveled, sweaty, exhausted, and with this tiny little voice is singing "Some of the Best Things in Life Are Free" up on the stage. And the people in the crowd are all, "Oh, isn't that adorable?" And you're just like, my God, get this woman to there are these weird nurses and medics like off to the side as soon as somebody collapsed to deal with them. It's an absolute freak show of a film, and yet I don't know how to describe it, honestly, without sort of ruining everything. There are moments in it that I was stunned by. Susanna York, who's been in lots of costume dramas and stuff, a British actor, most famous for playing Superman's mom in 1978. She's had a long history with those producers, the Salkinds. She plays this wannabe actress, with the kind of Marilyn Monroe wig, and her performance just blew my mind. Just blew my mind. Susanna's always been this polite sort of English lady that I would see in these things. And it's always her kind of curly hair. Her hair is different and everything, but it's always like her most defining characteristic. If you think of her red, super curly hair in Superman, that's an example. And I read this bit of trivia. I actually heard Richard Donner tell it out of his own voice. There's the scene in Superman where Marlon Brando's, "I bequeath you these things, and to the Son, the Father, and the Father, the Son." And sometime during a coffee break, she went up to Donner and she's like, "So from the Son, the Father, and the Father, the Son, what was the mother bequeath him?" "The mother bequeaths him dick." And I can't imagine the woman saying this. Right. I just can't imagine it, but I believe it now. I've seen something different in Susanna, who I always liked. It's just an incredible film. It's an amazing movie. I love it. I only gave it 8 out of 10 stars on my 10-star scale because there are things in it that I think, from an allegory standpoint, go too far and remove it from what could have been an amazing sort of human story. I think those things are right out of the book. I think you have to have them. So I'm not begrudging the film for those, but they made me go, the film's culmination, even for a film of this type, is a little much for me. I get it, but I kind of don't get it. So, but that's no reason to not see it in widescreen. It's incredible. Apparently Pollock was on like roller skates, zooming around in the dance floor between these people. The promoter of the thing comes up with this idea that at the end of every day, they have to have this race, a derby, where they just run around the track once, and then the last 3 couples who don't finish the race are eliminated. Those sequences are they're just incredible. The backstage talks and stuff. Fonda's very, very special in it. It says, not my favorite movie of hers, but it's probably my second favorite. So that should tell you something. In a way, I'm sad that I hadn't seen this sooner, but in a way, I'm just delighted that I got to see a movie of this caliber at this point.
Yeah, I look forward to seeing it in its full scope and everything. That'll be
visually, it's an incredible film.
Yeah,
and it's too bad because Pollock abandoned CinemaScope in the late 70s because he got sick of seeing his movies on TV and stuff just look like ass. Spielberg did to a certain degree too in the 80s, although he started making slightly different kinds of movies in the 80s too. That was part of the reason. But Out of Africa should have been in scope, right? I mean, come on. Right. Yeah, and it wasn't because he just and he even said, he's gone now, God rest him. He was a fantastic filmmaker. He even said, I kind of wish, at least on some of these, I did it that way because they'd been, and these days you can watch stuff that way. It really helps a lot. So.
Yeah,
they shoot horses, don't they?
They shoot horses, don't they?
More
and
impressed.
then 3 years later, 1972, another Sidney Pollack, a movie probably best known, sadly, best known for fantastic GIF and meme of
bearded Robert Redford slowly nodding as the camera zoomed in on him.
Yeah,
literally the culmination of the happiest moment in an extremely depressing film, which is funny because that makes it seem like everything's great, you know.
Yeah,
and it is for about 6 minutes of screen time.
The movie's called Jeremiah Johnson.
Yeah, and for those of you who are our age, it's really the story of Grizzly Adams. Grizzly Adams sort of stole this story. It's not about a fugitive, but it's about a guy who wants to go out, live off the land, wants to trap animals, is seduced by the magic of the wild frontier, and then the reality of that frontier is harsh and incredible. It was filmed largely, although it was filmed all over Utah and part of New Mexico, it was filmed largely on the 600 acres of Utah that Redford bought right after Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid with his money. So there's a love affair between him and the land and the idea of this story. And he plays a character that he would become later in his career reluctant to play. He liked to play principled guys, and he liked to let his sort of inner morality come out through the characters, even if they were compromised in some way. He really gravitated towards wise characters. This dude is off his rocker. He's not prepared to face anything that he faces, and when he faces the worst things you can face, he responds in kind. And it's a really different kind of role to see him in. But it's winter in Utah. That's the star of the thing.
Yeah.
Holy cow. Again, just visually, the widescreen vistas, the mountains, the snow, you feel your toes get cold, even if you watch this in July while you're watching it. It's loaded up with lots of great actors. Will Geer, Paul Benedict, who I always like. Just guy after guy of all these crazy characters that he meets on his journey. The film, they said, is structured like a long climb up the mountain and then a descent down the other side. And that's not just a metaphor for how it's structured. That's sort of what the dramatic structure of things looks like. But you feel that trudge and stuff, and then sort of a breaking point. It's really good. Jeremiah Johnson is known as being kind of a cheesy movie like that because it's part of that Mountain Man cycle of films that came out all around that era.
Yeah. And
the GIF hasn't helped because that GIF is really cheesy. It's at the end of a montage. It's the final shot at the end of a happy montage. But it doesn't prepare you for what the film is. It's really, really good. Redford did just knock me out in it. I love it. I had seen this a long time ago, but again, seeing it in high definition, seeing all the details, the trees, the holes and the patching in the interior of these cabins, the fabrics that they wear on their ponchos and stuff. I mean, it just beautiful.
Yeah.
The lack of color, so that when you see a color, like you see the color red, or you see something that jumps out at you in the wilderness, it's really, really cool. The animals are cool. I quite liked it.
Well, I dig Jeremiah Johnson too. Yeah. All right, next up, 1972. The crime comedy drama directed by Peter Yates, How to Steal a Diamond in 4 Uneasy Lessons.
Written by William Goldman.
Right. Oh, yeah. I'm seeing that here.
2 guys I used to get mixed up. Not the names, the guys, at least from this era. As they got older, they diverged and got very different, but were Ron Liebman and George Segal. George, who we just lost recently. Ron Liebman, I don't know. He played Jennifer Aniston's dad on Friends. So he's not a guy that I can just pull something out and say. He doesn't have a signature character, but he plays this thug in this film. It's so fun. There's a scene where it's a caper. The tagline was like, when they stole this diamond, they didn't know they were going to have to steal it again or something like that. It's got a very fun heist like structure to it. Redford is very at his breezy and charming best in it. Seagal, Liebman, and I can't remember the other actor's name, but they're his crew, and they're great. They feel
Redford,
like
Seagal, Liebman, and Paul Sand.
They're great New Yorkers, you know what I mean? That authenticity is right there. Goldman's script is snappy. Goldman obviously wrote Misery, wrote Princess Bride, wrote Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid, wrote all kinds of stuff.
Wrote All the President's Men.
I'm sorry, yes,
All the President. No.
Yes, he did. He did this, adapted the script for that. It's really fun film. It's a fun caper movie that I didn't know anything about because it wasn't a big hit. Just to give you
I should also real quick say it's actually in America it's known as The Hot Rock.
The Hot Rock.
Yeah.
Right. What'd you call it?
I called it by its UK title, How to Steal a Diamond in 4 Uneasy Lessons.
That's not as cool a title as The Hot Rock, but yeah. That's not a bad title, actually. That's very British.
It's very British,
is not very British, but whatever. I get it. There's a scene where at some point in the movie, one of the guys, Paul Sand's character, has the diamond on him after he's been arrested, and he's about to go to jail, and he's in the police precinct, and he has to hide it. There's nothing he can do. He's got to. It's going to be discovered if he keeps it. So he hides it. So the last part of the heist, it's a multi-part heist, as the British title suggests, is they're going to land a helicopter on top of the police precinct and break into it and get the diamond out. And Ron Liebman lands the helicopter on the wrong building. It's really funny, and they got to ask for directions from these janitors who are up having a smoke on the roof of this building to get to the police precinct. You know, it's full of stuff like that. That was a fun film, so check it out, The Hot Rock.
Very fun. All right, next up, Day of the Dolphin in 1973. George C. Scott.
Fa, love, pa. Fa and ba, love, pa and ma. If that doesn't melt your heart, I don't know what will. George C. Scott plays a scientist in the Caribbean who's teaching dolphins how to talk. And to speak English. That is as dumb as it says. It's written by Buck Henry. It's directed by Mike Nichols. This is the team that brought you The Graduate. And some shady government agency kidnaps the dolphins to retrain them to put plastic explosive, basically underwater mines on the bottom of yachts owned by guys from foreign countries that they don't like.
The tagline on this poster is, unwittingly, he trained a dolphin to kill the president of the United States. And it's a very serious looking George C.
It's a very serious movie. So the only joy you're going to get out of it in terms of comedy is just that absurd idea. And the key to liking Day of the Dolphin, and I like it quite a bit. Again, it's a beautiful widescreen movie shot on the ocean. The dolphins are, if you like dolphins, the dolphins are magical. George C. Scott never, ever, and it never in any movie ever, even Dr. Strangelove, you never will ever catch George winking at the camera, ever. He buys into what he is doing 100% in whatever project he takes. And that helps. It helps because if this film was, you feel like Buck Henry, when he wrote it, was putting everybody on. I mean, he's a noted comedic writer, but the film is deadly serious, sort of 70s conspiracy film involving dolphins. I liked it when I was a kid. I just watched it now in all its, like I said, widescreen, high definition glory. It's even better that way.
Wow.
It's not for everybody. It's a much ridiculed film because the story is bonkers, but I love it. Yeah. The dolphins are named Alpha and Beta, or because that's hard for them to say. It's much easier for them to speak single syllable words. They're called fa and ba. Fa actually names Beta ba, and fa love pa. Pa is George C. Scott, and Ma is his real life. Trish Van Deer, his real life wife, who was shared the screen with him in a lot, and she's she's mostly known for being the sidekick to George C. Scott and things. Those are her biggest films, but she's a good actor. The kids in it, Herman, what's his name?
Give me a second.
It's populated with a bunch of young hippie like scientist people who grew into old character actors that are kind of great.
Yeah, Edward Herman,
he's great in it. Paul Sorvino is really, really good in it. So it is an absurd idea, and it is exactly what it, as one reviewer said, it is as stupid as it sounds, but there's still something about it that I can't deny that draws me in.
Next up, 1977.
Dolphins being capable of human love and being capable to express it on screen is exciting to me. Maybe call me a softie.
Well, at least a dolphin softie. All right.
I'll take it over The Last Emperor any day, Bernardo Bertolucci, bastard.
All right. Next up is the Prince and the Pauper, or as it was released in the US, Crossed Swords.
Why didn't they call it Prince and the Pauper? That's only a famous Mark Twain story. What on earth were they thinking?
Yeah, that one's...
I'm convinced. Now, this movie's not very good. This is the Alexander Salkinds that produced... at the time, they were most famous for producing the Three Musketeers films with Oliver Reed and Charlton Heston and Michael York. Remember our professor and advisor, Jim, I won't use his last name because he didn't give us permission to in the show, but really one of the all-time great guys in the universe, truly. But he's a total, no offense to him, but he's a total like dyed-in-the-wool baby boomer, basically. And so this era of films would have special meaning for him. He was a huge fan of those Musketeers films. They're directed by Dick Lester, who also made Hard Day's Night, which is an important thing to baby boomers as well. I'm not a huge Dick Lester, Alexander Salkind, or Pierre Star Spangled Spangler fan, so I tend to prefer Alexander Dumas. And I think if you're a big Dumas fan, their version of that story is insulting almost. It's just one sight gag and visual nutso thing after another. It never slows down for people to talk to each other. The characters are vivid, but they're not believable. This film is not directed by Dick Lester. It's directed by Richard Fleischer, who's a better, I think, more serious cinema director. Maybe a little less fun, but I thought that would help this. It doesn't really. Prince and the Pauper is the story of Henry VIII's son
I'm sorry, I just am seeing the tagline on the poster.
Go ahead.
I'll share it in a minute.
All right. It's the story of the young prince, heir to the throne of England, who bumps into a beggar on the street that looks just like him, and as a joke, they decide to switch places for the day. But then things conspire to happen where they really get stuck in their alternative worlds, and that's not good for anybody, as it turns out. So go ahead.
The tag on this is, see Oliver Reed cross his eyes. See Raquel Welch cross her legs. See Mark Lester cross his fingers. See Ernest Borgnine cross his heart. And see George C. Scott, Rex Harrison, David Hemmings, and Charlton Heston get double-crossed. See the biggest cross-up of them all, Crossed Swords.
If it were named Prince and the Pauper instead of Crossed Swords, we'd be saying this is pretty much the best filmed version of Prince and the Pauper. And in that way, it has some value. But they went in a different direction. So it's not known. It wasn't even clear to me when I put it in that that's what it was. It starts out with this Mark Twain thing, and I'm like, Mark Twain? Right. What the hell? And then I got caught up, basically. But it's if you liked those Three Musketeers films, if you like that sort of goofy adventure mixed with a lot of visual comedy, you might enjoy this. It's pretty well made, I have to say. The kid, Mark Lester, who's most famous for playing Oliver in the Academy Award-winning Oliver! The musical version of Oliver, stopped acting after this movie because he got so much criticism, especially at home in England, for it sucking because of him. Like, you know, we talked about how the press can just be awful. He got like, he was, you know, and it's in England, it's tough because they don't really hate you completely unless they've loved you a little bit. So it's this roller coaster ride where you go from being the most popular little boy in all of England and every role like this is yours. And then suddenly they just turn on you like vipers and ruin your life. So it's a sad story because of that, but the story itself is rather breezy and kind of fun.
All right. So next up, we have a couple movies by auteur filmmaker Robert Altman. Very. And
how although I never hated on Robert Altman, like I might hate somebody like Bernardo Bertolucci, for example, but I'm not a. You know me. I'm not.
Well, yeah, I mean, well, to me, sometimes
I don't like MASH. I really didn't like The Player, even when it was new. I didn't like Pret-a-Porter or Shortcuts. Like I really thought I didn't like him at all. I finally watched Nashville because everybody said, well, you got to at least see Nashville. I didn't hate Nashville, but I didn't love Nashville. So I've always thought I'm not a Robert Altman fan, you know.
He's a very distinct filmmaker. He has his style. There is the Altman style, and it's
not his style that I actually object to. It's when the point of view in the movie overwhelms any sense of a human story, and I just feel like a lot of his movies, like that's a danger that happens in all of them. It almost happens in these two, but these two, Joel, that we're about to talk about, are the best Robert Altman films I've ever seen. I was kind of enraptured with both of them for different reasons. The first one was
The Long Goodbye, 1973.
Not an Elliot Gould fan either, I gotta say. I don't dislike him, but it's the same problem. He's very superficial performer, and even though he's extremely entertaining, and he really is, it's hard to be like, you know, who are you? You know what I mean? It's like watching a stand-up comedian for 2 hours.
Right. Yeah. Oh, yeah.
The Long Goodbye, based on Philip Marlowe, or Philip Marlowe, sorry, is the character in it. The private
Raymond Chandler. Raymond Chandler? Yeah, Raymond Chandler.
Yeah, Raymond Chandler. You know, who wrote these great private detective, like 50s post-World War II stories. And Altman, every decision he made creatively on this film got knocked out of the park, was a home run. The first one was, we're going to set this in the present day, and this guy's going to be a throwback 50s private detective who nevertheless is living in a brutal, awful early 70s, basically American Depression era world.
Yeah.
And that incongruity in each scene is going to create all this tension without even having to fake any sort of dramatic histrionics. And it works like gangbusters. Gould disappears into this guy. He gets that the guy is clever. He nails his funny one-liners when he has them. But he gets that the guy is fundamentally a loser and content to be, to some degree. And that's sympathetic in a way. He's just trying to unravel this, sleuth out this ridiculous story, and he just keeps, through bad luck, like actually solving each little bit of it. It kind of falls into the solution. It's really strong. Sterling Hayden, another actor I'm not real crazy about, he's fantastic in it. Apparently, he just showed up on screen and made up everything that he said. And Gould, again, was a big enough guy to be like, all right, if that's how we're going to do it, rolls with it. Lets Hayden take stage, it's fun. And Mark Rydell, the filmmaker who we were talking about earlier, used to be an actor, kind of a kid actor. And when he got older, he's like, nobody wants the baby-faced, whatever. Like, I'm not going to be a leading man. I'm not going to get to play any cool bad guys. What am I going to do? I'm going to be the doctor who explains to some more famous actor, like, what's going on with his patient. That's my lot in life. So he got behind the camera. He plays a bad guy in this that's as bad and big a dick as I've ever seen. And yet he brings a lot of charisma to it. That's undeniable. And the same thing, he was roommates at the time with a screenwriter. I can't remember the guy's name, but an accomplished screenwriter of the day. And he basically told who's the filmmaker again?
Robert Altman. Yeah, Altman.
Told Altman that he was he'd consider doing it, coming out of retirement to do it, but he wanted to make it into something different. And Altman said, sure, show me what you got. And they went away and over the weekend rewrote all the scenes that he appears in, came back to Altman and said, here's what we got. And he goes, he loved it. He's like, we're putting it in. I'm putting it all in. You're on board. And Rydell's quote was, that was Robert, especially at that time. He didn't really care about anything as long as everybody was giving it their best. And that's a really cool guy to work for. I loved The Long Goodbye. Brian Bevel, who we had on our anniversary show and on our Gangster Movies in the 90s show, he at some point when I was ranting against Altman, he said, you should probably check out The Long Goodbye, and I was like, okay. Yeah. Because it's not an ensemble comedy. It really is a genre film that he just hits out of the park. And a fun bit of trivia that I thought was fun, that you remember that cat that would only eat the one kind of cat food growing up in all those TV commercials when we were a kid? Mm-hmm. I don't remember if it was Fancy Feast or what it was, but the cat had a name whose name I can't remember.
Morris.
They were Morris, and they're all like, oh, he's finicky, right? That was the word they were always using. Morris, the cat, the same cat, actually appears in the opening one-shot tracking shot through Gould's apartment in this, where he's looking for cat food and he doesn't have any. He tries making it eggs. He tries all this stuff to get the cat to leave him the hell alone. Mm-hmm. And eventually he goes on this tour of early 70s LA to all these different grocery stores because they don't have the cat food that his cat likes. That's how the movie begins. And it's the same cat. Apparently that ad campaign was inspired by the opening of this film, which I found to be a nifty bit of trivia, because the sequence, a relationship between a man and his cat, or a woman and his cat, is a thing that's hard to fake, I think, in a Hollywood way. And the cat is, first of all, again, Gould sharing screen time with the cat, and he quickly gets that the cat is the star. The cat's going to do whatever the hell it wants, and he's just got to let it do its thing and then respond to it. It's a brilliant sequence. Magical movie sequence, I think.
I can't remember if The Long Goodbye was the first Altman film or if MASH was my first Altman film. But I haven't seen it in a very long time. But I
so good.
Really like
wow.
It. Next up is Altman's Buffalo Bill and the Indians from 1977.
Now this is Altman in his. This is his thing. It's this massive ensemble movie about the Buffalo Bill Wild West shows and how Buffalo Bill convinced Sitting Bull, who's still alive, to come on the show so they can act out the famous battles that Sitting Bull was involved in. And it's called Buffalo Bill and the Indians, or Sitting Bull's history lesson.
Sitting Bull's history, or Sitting Bull's history lesson.
It has what's that called? The melodrama title with the long title. I can't remember what that is, but that has "or" in it.
Right. I don't know.
Anyway, it's outstanding. It helps Paul Newman is such a soulful and amazing guy. This is another movie where Paul Newman was asked what his favorite performance was, and he couldn't narrow it down, but he named 3 films: Life and Times of Judge Roy Bean, Buffalo Bill and the Indians, and Slapshot, which are not his. I mean, they're great performances, but they weren't Oscar nominated. He won Oscars and stuff. Yeah. They're just not the movies you'd think he'd peg. He didn't say they were his best movies. He said they were his favorite performances. That was the term that he used. Paul Newman is, man, there aren't any like him. He just was the best ever. He really is on the short list of mine for best actor ever. Best American actor, maybe, but on the best actor. He's so good, and he's so good in this. His Buffalo Bill, the greatest buffaloer of all time. This guy who's famous for just murdering buffalo from a train for no reason, and it causing the extinction of a species practically. And he was celebrated for that. And these Wild West shows are hilarious. You've got Geraldine Chaplin as Annie Oakley. You've got Harvey Keitel is in it. Joel Grey. God, we love Joel Grey.
Yep, Joel Grey. Burt Lancaster.
Yeah. Shelley Duvall and Pat McCormick show up as Mr. Grover Cleveland and Mrs. Grover Cleveland at the end. And Shelley Duvall in Robert Altman film is always welcome. You know, she's amazing. And Will Sampson, Sitting Bull never utters a word in the film, but Will Sampson, one of the more famous Native American actors of all time, from One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest et al., plays his interpreter. So, and eventually replaces him in the show, which is it's just a gutting, heartbreaking thing when it happens. That's a really, really cool movie. Really cool piece of history. The spectacle of the show is amazing. It was released during the bicentennial. It was called a scathing reaction to the bicentennial or whatever. But to me, what I love about it and what I don't love about a lot of Altman's films is that it isn't that. It's this deeply human story about these sensitive, ultimately people and guilt and shame and you know, and Altman wanted Marlon Brando for it, and Marlon Brando's interested in cowboys and stuff and was excited, but where he lost him, to go along with your Olivia Hussey story, where Altman lost Brando, he goes, oh, and I want a big star, because the movie to a certain degree is about stardom. And Brando was like, nah, hung up the phone on him. But they got the right guy. Newman in his digs looks like Bill Cody, looks a lot like him, and really nails the complicated emotional stuff later in the film. I liked it a lot. Very cool. Robert Altman.
I've actually never seen this one, so I'll have to check this one out.
You overnight, just it increased my esteem quite a bit, so I'm grateful for that.
All right. 2 more films in in our Sounds of the 70s, or Sights of the 70s, I guess we could be. But yeah, the original.
To really work at their best, you need both.
The sights and sounds of the 70s celebration. Yes. The original Taking of Pelham 1, 2, 3.
Yeah, and let's end with this one since we're about running out of time, and we'll save the next one for next week's show. Because Taking a Pelham 1, 2, 3 is a great way to end the show. It's super 70s. It takes place in the 70s. It captures the wide tie, sort of fast talking New York working class atmosphere. It's a fantastic caper, a la Die Hard, where you've got a bunch of hostages in a confined space. It's sort of it's the first movie I remember that really gets that in a high concept sort of way. It's about a bunch of guys who all use colors for names. Quentin, does that ring any bells? Who kidnap a New York subway train and hold the people on it hostage for $1 million. I wanted to say for $400. It's when Tony Scott and Denzel Washington remade Taking a Pelham 1, 2, 3 in the 2000s. They had to up it obviously to $10 million because $1 million just doesn't sound worth it anymore.
Right.
I like to joke that, man, I feel like $100 today because it's funny to me. Whenever you define yourself by money, adjust it ahead of time for inflation, I guess is what I'm saying. Robert Shaw, Martin Balsam, Hector Elizondo. I'm not going to name all the bad guys, but that level of talent in this kind of role is extremely welcome thing. All of the extras, all the hostages have these unique personalities that come to life vividly on screen. All the working class transit cops and the mayor, Walter Matthau is kind of the star of it.
Yep.
But there's more. Jerry Stiller. There's another great actor in those.
Tony Roberts.
Yeah. It's great. It's sort of the ultimate grungy early 70s ghetto style film, and yet it has this, like I said, it has this high concept terrorism, however you want to put it, hostage negotiating situation. And Matthau he's taking this. Matthau's is a fantastic actor, but he is a little hit or miss. It's hard to know. His take on a character is going to be broad, pretty much whatever he does. So you never know if you're going to get a serious version of him or not. This movie has tons of comedy in it, but he, like Scott in Day of the Dolphin, he really plays it straight, and that helps a lot. It helps sell the reality of the situation. Matthew Broderick's dad plays the train conductor. It's kind of fun because it's not one of those things where he looks like Matthew Broderick, but he kind of looks a little like him. And because he sounds like him, like you're like, they've got to be related or whatever. Yeah. And then I look it up, and sure enough, one of our favorite New Yorkers, I guess J.O. Sanders is technically our favorite New Yorker, but we like Broderick a lot.
If Broderick wants that number one spot, he can always come on the show.
This is a movie, again, that's very famous. I don't think I'm pulling a veil off of something that's been underappreciated. It's got a perfect, for those of you give a crap, it's got a perfect Rotten Tomatoes rating. And we've talked about Rotten Tomatoes before, and the reason to bring it up with this, because normally I like to not bring it up, is there's nobody who's going to watch this movie that doesn't think it's good. That's how you get a perfect Rotten Tomatoes movie. Not by making the greatest movie ever, but by making one that everybody can literally agree on its positivity or negativity. That's how you get the 100% or the 0%. And this film, I agree. It's like, how could you watch this and not think it's great? It's really, really great. It's really exciting. It's very clever. It has moments of humor, moments of action.
It's really good. Really good pacing in it.
Really, really well done. Who directed Taking a Pelham 1-2-3 originally?
It was Joseph Sargent.
His best film. Joseph Sargent's a good director, but he's also made a kind of bunch of dumb ones. Jaws 4, we kind of talked about at the end of his career. But he's a good director. This is his best movie. It's based on a book, which is probably a pretty breezy, great read.
Yeah.
I loved it. So there you go.
Well, there you go. All right. Well, folks, that is going to do it for part 1 of our celebration of the 70s. That's right. We're going to hit you back next week. A little bit of part 2 of the sounds and sights of the 70s. Here we go now.
We're going to have a party.
That's right. A 70s party.
Inviting all our friends.
That means you are invited next week.
We're going to have a real good time.
We are going to have a good time talking more about some films from the 1970s.
And 69.
And then the 60 and a couple in the 60s. It'll be a little bit of the late.
I think they were all 69, so I think we stuck to our promise there.
Indeed. Yeah, no, we didn't dip back any further. Into
80s didn't really start until Thriller either, you know.
I would concur with that. I think that's pretty accurate.
I mean, we got hints, but it was mostly just the 70s still.
So. Right. See, for me, it's no, Thriller's pretty accurate. I was gonna say
kind of Christmas of '82.
Yeah.
And then the songs on the radio in '83 are '80s, all of them. You couldn't mistake them for. That's 70 songs.
That's true. All right, folks. Well, that is going to do it for us for this week. We
love you all. Hope we brought some cool things to light and just reiterated some things that are awesome.
Yeah, come and check out part 2 next week. We will have some more super fun, sexy 70s action. Yeah. And all right, that is going to do it for us on the Movie Show with Joel and Ryan. Take care, everybody. Bye.
Bye, everybody.
Thank you for listening to The Movie Show with Joel and Ryan. Remember, all views and opinions represented in this podcast are personal and belong solely to the speaker and do not represent those people, institutions, or organizations that the speaker may or may not be associated with, unless explicitly stated. None of these views and opinions were intended to malign or deceive. And now, here's the producers, circa 1982, to play us out.